Please join me in welcoming Nicole Bonney, CEO of the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies. Please welcome Nazat Jaffrey, Executive Director of the Canadian Council of Muslim Women. And finally, Dr. Samantha Nutt, founder and president of War Child USA in Canada and assistant professor at the University of Toronto. All right, I want to ask you three, you have been in leadership positions throughout your careers, and I wanted to ask, we'll be talking about challenges and obstacles, of course, but what are the advantages of being a female leader? I'll go to Nicole first.
You know, it's interesting asking that question in a structure of patriarchy, right, and in the existence where you see the barriers of sexism that are so overt and evident in everything that we do, including the policies and procedures and structures and what we've inherited, particularly within the child welfare sector and in the public sector at large. But it still rings true when, certainly for my role and for those who are in public sector, that the vast majority of the people that we support and serve are women. And I think that that's often forgotten in light of what the backdrop has looked like for many years in terms of, as I said before, with a lot of the ideologies that permeate our structures that are very male-dominated, but not only that, but it's middle-class driven, it's heteronormative, it's white, and so we often don't remember and center the fact that we serve women, diverse women. We serve women who are racialized and Indigenous, and often overrepresented in our systems. And so the advantage that I bring is really being able to bring that intersectional lens to decision making, where I'm not just thinking about one vantage point, but that I'm able to think of multiple worldviews, multiple intersections in decisions and in conversations that really captures a vast, broad section of our community that is often overlooked, but then at the very same time overrepresented. So they're invisible and hypervisible at the same time, and so being able to really bring that perspective.
Thank you. Nazat?
I think the biggest advantage is that as a woman, you know, you experience so many challenges already because of the patriarchy that we live in. And you end up having to deal with things that men will never have to deal with. They don't have to bear children. Usually it's the woman who gets up in the middle of the night to feed the child. She's the one who makes their lunch boxes. I'm sorry, I know there are men who do that, so I don't want to offend anyone. But the truth is that women still do the bulk of childcare, housework, and they also have to work outside the home if they choose to do that. And their responsibilities are exacerbated because of a challenge of being a woman in the workplace, even today, where the decision-making often is done by men. And we live in a society where, you know, the deferral, unfortunately, the deferral still today to male decision-makers is that we have to keep on working at it. We have to keep on being heard. We have to say, hey, I think I just said that 5 minutes ago. Did you hear me? Happens all the time, you know? A bright idea comes up, and the guy who says it, oh yeah, oh, that's a great idea. Well, I just said it 5 minutes ago. Were you listening? No, we're often not listened to. But the advantage for me is that I can say that to you. I can say, look, I just said that 5 minutes ago, but you paid no attention because it's me, you know, a brown woman. People usually don't know whether I'm Muslim or not, but certainly I'm a woman of color. I'm soft-spoken, sorry, I guess I'm getting louder right now, but that's because I want you to hear me. So, you know, I think I have an advantage. I can say that because they're listening, they're finally listening. And the other thing is that because of the fact that we are, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I come from an immigrant background, racialized background, and the lessons that you're taught along the way on survival, in this pretty mean world, give you an advantage. You can fight anything, you can do anything. And that's really how I feel about why I'm sitting here in front of you today talking to 2,000 people. That's my advantage. Thank you.
Sam.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Nicole and Nazrat have said around crushing the patriarchy, so I will certainly endorse those statements. But also I want to pick up on what Nicole said initially, which is that in my work, 80% of refugees and IDPs, internally displaced people in the world, are women and children. And the vast majority of our programming is with women and children, and they are uniquely vulnerable. And so being a woman in the midst of that environment creates its own challenges, certainly. I mean, I have been threatened on many occasions, including with sexual violence in those environments. But at the same time, it gives me unique access to local women's leaders, local community organizations, and it makes it easier, I think, to sort of identify the path forward and to invest in their goals and their vision and their ambitions, because there is a sisterhood, there is a trust, there is a fellowship that comes from that, and I think that that's been an absolute asset. I would also say, picking up on what you said, that as women navigating in this world, you do become more attuned to consensus building and active listening, sometimes as a matter of self-preservation, but also because that is how you have to work to sometimes get ahead and to find the path. And I think that in a leadership role, that can become a very important asset, and it's something that I think that I try to bring to our work and to our organization.
Nicole and Nazrat, I want to ask you a question. Start with, what are some of the invisible barriers racialized women face in particular?
I mean, there's a number of barriers, but I think that when it comes to leadership, I don't think that anyone is successfully able to occupy a position of leadership without sponsorship, without people being able to walk alongside, to mentor, and to support. And this whole theme of invisibility, the theme of silencing, it's hard to then be sponsored and mentored when inevitably you're invisible within the context of the workplace. In addition, I think that there also is kind of the experiences of microaggressions, which in and of itself can be challenged, because it really is just forms of violence that happen that are often so covert and unseen in many ways, but felt deeply in all of the different ways in which decisions are made or undermining happens of oneself and one's position in spaces. And so I think that those remain barriers, and certainly for myself and for racialized and many Indigenous women, First Nation, Inuit, Métis women that I speak to, it still exists, and it becomes even more sophisticated as time goes on, and harder to call out in workspaces. And so it does take so much navigation. It takes a lot of resilience. It takes certainly a lot of fortitude to be able to rise to the occasion in spite of those barriers that many around you don't bear witness to.
Zat, did you want to add on that?
I think it's difficult for someone like Nicole and myself. We are visible because of who we are. People can tell that we're different, perhaps. But then you hear things like, gee, I didn't know you were Muslim. Really? You don't sound Muslim. You don't look Muslim. So I'm there, I'm in front of them, but I'm invisible to them as a whole person. So in fact, for a long, long time, people didn't used to really pay much attention to me because I would try to blend in. I would try to just live my life in the workplace, everywhere, to be accepted. I was raised that way. I was told to be invisible. You know, don't draw attention to yourself. You're going to get into trouble. Don't be out. Don't be loud. Don't, you know, speak quietly. Be polite. So it was sort of a conditioning to be invisible, you know, not to be noticed. And so I find that those barriers continue to exist in workplaces. And also, you know, Nicole talked about intersectionality and about the fact that each individual person has multiple intersectional identities. You know, you're a woman, you may have a disability or a diverse ability, you may be racialized, you could be a professional person, you could be a tradesperson. There are so many things that shape who you are. And most of those intersections are actually invisible. But when you start thinking about the complexity of the human being, each person, then you have to start thinking about how you make them visible. How do you recognize that they exist in your workplace, that they're contributing to your society, they're contributing to your societies and your towns, and listening to them, talking to them, and understanding who they are so that they become visible to you, from being invisible and always in the background and not being taken seriously.
All right, I want to get some examples from you guys. I'm going to start with Sam. Some examples of how you've ensured women and people of color are represented at all levels at your company, including the interview process and et cetera.
I think in any workplace, the most important thing is, and you picked up on this as well, it's active listening. You have to listen, understand different points of view, and ensure that you're integrating those different points of view. But there also have to be pathways within the organization. So, for example, around the world, as I mentioned, 99% of our staff are local, and that includes at the most senior level, which is our country director level, and then beyond that as well. But that's taken us many years to achieve. So it starts from a place of going into a community, working with our local leaders, working with our staff, working with local organizations, and understanding that that is an iterative process. There has to be a continual investment in that leadership development, because it's not enough to say that you have diversity. You have to have multiple levels of diversity with those kinds of pathways for people to achieve. And it takes time, it takes consistent investment, but more than anything else, it means making that a priority within your organization. And that's something for us. I mean, when you're working, it's a little different for us in the sense that when you're working in war-torn environments, the people who know the most about those environments are the ones who come from those communities and who understand what's going to be required to be able to address people's needs on an ongoing basis.
How do you create meaningful inclusion efforts without making people in your organization feel singled out? Because that is also sort of a balance that has to be made as well.
You know, it's important in terms of those intentional efforts. And I think one of the key things to understanding, you know, inclusion efforts is also understanding that the existence of exclusion has been around way longer than the concepts of inclusion, in that when we think of you know, years of oppressive structures that have existed, that have excluded many from decision-making tables, and all you need to do is look down any, I remember being in a school, one of the boardrooms, and looking around at all of the chairs of that particular school board, and they were all white men for about, for so many years that dated back to like the 50s when they started taking these pictures. And then one woman showed up in like the 80s, one woman's photo, and then it continued on. So when we think of how deep we have been in terms of excluding not only women from decision-making tables, but excluding First Nation, Inuit, Métis people, excluding Black Canadians, excluding racialized identities, excluding non-Christians from the table for many, many years. Our systems are embedded in this idea and in this thinking that really does, I go back to the word of intentionality, to undo that and to unlearn what we have learned for so many years. And so inclusion starts from the place of acknowledging our history and acknowledging the legacy that we have inherited in our current day. And that it is so important, as you talk about, you reference tokenism, and not allowing for that one, I think the key is not allowing for just the one hire, right? And what are we doing beyond just the one identity that represents their community to be put on the spot within our organizations, that it's not good enough to kind of check that one box, but really, how are we doing this again, in a meaningful way that involves multiple representations within the walls of our organizations, so that that one voice doesn't stand alone and speak alone, or that one woman isn't at the boardroom table speaking for all women in your jurisdiction, but that we have to seek and go beyond the one. And really builds community in that authentic, meaningful way. And so those are, that's kind of what I'm thinking, to go beyond just tokenism within organizations.
That's a good one. Sam, I'm going to ask you a similar question here, hoping to get some examples of ways leaders may be unknowingly creating barriers or excluding female employees. There was some good lists there, but I'm wondering if there's any more to add there.
Yes, and I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said, so I won't repeat that. I think it's, I certainly can't. You said it so beautifully. I would say, look, when you're running an organization, it's also being aware of the barriers that you exist and who you reward and why you're rewarding them. And I'll give you some very practical examples. I mean, if you ever want to see me lose my mind, schedule a breakfast meeting in our office. And that's because, we have a lot of single parents in our office, a lot of them are female, and just the act of waking up early, getting your child to school requires an insane amount of logistics. And when you schedule those 7:30 in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning meetings, some of those people end up having to opt out or feeling as if their contribution isn't being valued. In the same way, when I hear managers and others who will say to me, well, this person works incredibly hard and they put in really long hours, and I go, well, yeah, but what are they actually accomplishing? Who we're looking to invest in needs to change and needs to be different, and we need to understand or do a better job of understanding the whole person, what they're bringing to an organization, the perspective that they bring, the diversity, the richness of experience that they have to offer, and not the sort of standard metrics that were set in 1958 around, it's the white guy who shows up first thing in the morning and, goes to the breakfast meeting and then goes to the golf course and then goes for drinks after work and then is there back at the office until 10 o'clock at night. I mean, that stuff makes me, no pun intended, totally nuts. Like, it really does. I got lots of these jokes, folks.
Great answer. Nazat, I want to come to you. For companies looking to diversify their outreach efforts and form a talent pool in non-traditional ways, I've heard that a lot. We haven't had candidates apply, they don't know, we don't know where to go. Any advice? Where can they start?
Well, in our work, allyship is really, really important. So what you have to start doing is reaching people, creating allies in communities that you traditionally may not have reached out to. So we're happy with municipalities in particular that have been working with us. They invite us to the tables, they attend our events. They've become very engaged with us lately in some communities, and we really welcome that. So if you want to diversify your workforce, all levels, it's really great to go to places, to go to organizations that you have not traditionally gone to, because you're going to meet all kinds of people through that process that you'd never even thought about, who could contribute to your organization. So allyship, outreach to very diverse communities, and especially communities that you haven't thought about as potential sources for talent for your organization. And when you think about our communities, Muslim communities are extremely diverse. You know, they have men, women, and children that are very different from one another. So we cannot make assumptions about them. We need to be open to what they could bring to our organization. And you know, I talked about communities. There are many, many, many communities. And within those communities, there are many different people who can offer all kinds of knowledge, experience, lived experiences to your organization. So you can certainly reach out to organizations like ours, but I think the key word is to be creative, to think outside the box. If you keep on going back to the same way of recruiting people and bringing them in, you know, whether it's through your, you know, advertising your jobs and posting your jobs in certain places, start talking to different organizations and people that are out there doing the kind of work that we're doing. And it's really, really useful at the municipal level, because a lot of the people in our communities already volunteer. They're out there doing all kinds of great stuff. So think about them as possible places where you can actually tap those resources.
Thank you. All right, I do want to know, Nicole, why is it important that women are represented in decision-making positions, specifically at municipal government level?
It's integral that women are represented at municipal levels. I mean, when we look at key drivers, particularly around the feminization of poverty and those who experience the greatest amounts of disparities and lack of access. In most communities, it's women. And so to be able to have women at decision-making tables and diverse representations, I really want to underscore that, diverse representation of women's voices at the table, including racialized women and Indigenous women and women with various abilities, trans women, you know, across the board, and intersectional representation, is for the fact that in every municipality, those who are most marginalized are going to be women. And that you are going to have to not only hear and engage those women, but being able to sensitize yourself to the needs of women and children, and what poverty looks like, and what those social determinants of health factors that they that intersect, that they struggle with within your communities, that it has to be top of mind, it has to be top of conversation. It has to be one of those key drivers and indicators in terms of community wellness. And so an absence of women at the table bringing that intersectional voice, bringing that critical conversation and critical lens has to be important. And I say that in the context of, you know, having women at the table is important, but if women do not feel that they can actually represent the voice of women and they just have to reproduce patriarchal sentiments, that's also not, that's not what I'm speaking of. It's not just women who kind of check the markers of being a woman, but speak all the, you know, all of the maleness, kind of that male culture, that patriarchal culture, and they just embody that through their female bodies, that's not the kind of representation that we're talking about. And it has to be the kind of workplace culture that allows for, you know, the authentic, diverse voice of women to be at the table and to represent a catchment of those who are often most marginalized in their communities.
Sam, we're a couple of years out from the height of the Me Too movement, and I want to know from your perspective, has anything changed?
Huh. That's the million-dollar question. I think that what has changed is that there are more platforms available for women to share their experiences, to call out bad behavior. There is an awareness that things that were considered just very typical and acceptable behavior in the past, that is no longer the case, and that that if you engage in that behavior, you can and hopefully will be called out for it. Having said that, on a global level, we are witnessing a tremendous regression in the rights of women and girls, and also those who identify as women and girls throughout the world. I mean, even you just have to look to the United States for evidence of that impact in terms of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. But even in Afghanistan, with the rise of the Taliban and limits on girls' education, having said that, we as an organization have been given permission to resume our girls' education work at the primary level. So we are slowly trying to ensure that those rights continue into the future. But I think that we still have a tremendous amount of work to do, and I think that we, as women who live here in Canada, we automatically, by virtue of being here, whether we were born here, or whether we are immigrants here, or whether we are settlers, or whether we are Indigenous, we live in a very safe part of the world relative to other countries, and that comes with a degree of privilege for all of us, and it makes us very lucky. And I think that recognizing that there are still millions and millions of women and girls who don't even have a fraction of the opportunity that any single one of us has living here is really critical. And so that activism, that engagement, that concern should not end at our borders.
All right, thank you so much. Everyone, a round of applause. Thank you so much for taking the time for us.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.